Hello beautiful friends, welcome to my channel. I'm really glad you're here. Today's video will explore the relationship between gender and performance, one that has become particularly interesting in the state of quarantine where our performances of self are kind of halted, or more digitally manicured, or constrained to the people, if any, that we are sharing physical space with. And I know that my own brain is all up in knots over this shift, so I figured some of yours might be as well. So today, we'll be taking a closer look at how socially construed our genders really are. And at the end of this video, I'll leave you with 3 questions for personal contemplation that can help connect anything we discuss today to your own life. So after 4 years or so of experimentation, diverse expression, changing my name and hormones, and lots of other things about my performances of self, lately my gender feels like the hypothetical question, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Obviously the answer is yes, presumably. It is not an audience which creates the sound of a falling tree, nor my sense of gender, but the way in which both of these happenstances are interpreted depend entirely on an audience, or which audience is observing them. This is not an altogether unfamiliar experience for me. Just a year ago, I was writing my thesis and remember my family members periodically asking me if I had left the house at all in the week. But this time, I am not alone in my isolation. We are all isolated together. So I'm left thinking about gender in slightly different ways that I think can gracefully hold in tandem the individual and the collective, which I believe is something we must become better at doing as a society. So by this point, it's old hat to say that gender is performative, that it is a social construct. Thanks to Judith Butler's Gender Trouble, any of us who study or live in a state of gender diversity cannot avoid this truth, even while these ideas have struggled to incorporate themselves into the broader populace. Granted, Butler's writing is a bit dense, to say the least, and it takes some work to unlock. But the sediment of these ideas is everywhere. And once you see behind the curtain of gender performance, it's hard to go about using words like man or woman without feeling like they get caught in your throat a little. And while all of us feel the weight of gender norms and narrow scripts for what successful gender performances should look like, trans and gender nonconforming people consciously feel the weight of this almost all the time. As such, for me at least, it's not just that my sense of gender has been obsessively cultivated and recultivated and recultivated, but that I also have a deep understanding of its fluidity, that I can literally feel it shift in my body when I walk into a new environment and have to reassess the new audience for my gender. In other words, my gender, like everyone's, evolves depending on who I'm with and the setting in which I find myself. It's not that I'm consistently changing my wardrobe or pronouns or name or anything. Even while they have taken some serious time to work out, most of my outward expressions and sources of euphoria have stayed pretty consistent. This isn't the case for all trans people, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But for me, while my gender performance and self-understanding have stayed more or less within a certain range, I have been out as trans at an evangelical Bible college, in a graduate department of religion, as well as a graduate department of women and gender studies, at a downtown queer bar, and a prom dress shop, and those are just the places that I worked. But I can assure you that the kinds of transphobia I encountered, the stakes of what my gender performance meant, looked like, felt like, and manifested as were different in each of these environments. So what it has meant or felt like to be trans has depended as much on where I was and who I was with as what I was wearing or how I was expressing myself. But now, due to coronavirus, I'm thankfully in a safe, socially controlled environment, where I know I won't be judged and my femininity or gender won't be interrogated because I choose to wear pajamas and a t-shirt all day. So while the rest of my psychological needs are scattered about the wind, I am actually thinking about gender surprisingly less. It's not that my feelings about gender or my self-understanding have actually transformed, but that for perhaps the first time since I began questioning my gender, that I don't feel the immediate daily rub of false assumptions, ignorance, interactions with strangers, and consistent transphobia. Ironically, when I do think about my gender, or about my transness, I feel very old insecurities bubbling up that I haven't seen in a long time. Like, how do I know if I'm trans? If I'm actually this comfortable just as myself, without any other labels attached, even labels I have needed in the past or labels I enjoy, then why do I need these in the future? And the answer seems to be, somewhat unfortunately, performativity. I am once again confronted with the painful reality that the source of most of my dysphoria is not actually my own mind or body, but our organization of a society which requires negotiation with such narrow and violent scripts of expression. And I am forced to rely on these scripts for my own survival, but this is exhausting work. For instance, when I am catcalled on the street, I lean as far into the script of femininity as possible, because I know from personal experience, as well as from tragic interactions of many other trans femme folks, that someone noticing a crack in your femininity after a moment of sexual objectification can be a recipe for violence. But if I am just running out to the store to grab a missing ingredient for dinner, it's doubtful that I've done my makeup or am passing as feminine particularly well, and so I will try my best to blend into masculinity, to make it through the grocery store unnoticed because I'm just there for tomato sauce. I should note up front that these negotiations don't always work. Sometimes I think I am blending into masculinity just fine, and might be, but then I will be harassed for not being masculine enough, or something, I'm not really sure. Or I will pass as feminine momentarily, but then I will get clocked, and suddenly the rules of the game change for me really quickly. Speaking candidly, inhabiting a nebulous terrain of gender has made it so that I can rarely tell what someone thinks about me at all, and am consistently surprised by the assumptions people make. For a good while, I felt insecure because my performance of gender shifted. I felt that a refusal to commit to a singular presentation somehow made me less trans or disingenuous. But that subsided when I realized how much of this was beyond my control in the first place. That some days I would go out and some people would assume I was male and some would assume I was female, and I began to realize that how people interpret gender performances has almost as much to do with them as it does you. Which is why an evolving them, or in the case of those of us staying at home in the midst of quarantine, a total lack of them, can create feelings of space and distance that are foreign. And that it's super reasonable to question your gender all the time, but perhaps even more so when your presentation is adjusted to a much smaller audience. Because how we perform ourselves and who we understand ourselves to be depend on our audience, or lack thereof, as well as our own personal understandings. The upshot, I suppose, is that once we overcome that this is a strange and potentially newly dysphoric time, that we can also see through the cracks to a world that is less burdened by gender, where the audience of publicity and society can become more educated, and people of all kinds can express themselves in a whole variety of ways without coming under scrutiny or risking violence. But I think it's important that those of us who deal with this shit on a daily basis give ourselves more grace and self-understanding, not to judge ourselves for our questions and for fluidity, to remember that all gender performance is a negotiation with social norms, and there is no right or wrong way to go about reclaiming your own body or to navigate a social order so fixed in normative violence. In other words, this is not all on you, whoever you are. Just do the best you can, care for yourself in the ways you know how, and find the spaces where you can feel less burdened, where you can feel a little more safe. And in time, those spaces will continue to grow as more people grow in their understanding of how binary gender is hurting us all. We just gotta keep on keeping on. Which is to say, what does it feel like to be trans in a time of stay-at-home quarantine? Strange and kind of dissonantly quiet. I genuinely don't know the last time I went 2 months without being verbally harassed in some way. And on my last venture out of the house for an interview last Monday, I was immediately greeted by some of the most concentrated transphobia I've experienced in a good while. So I'm kind of personally afraid for things to unlock, and to once again engage with the same degree of gender bullshit. Even while so much else is up in the air, it's been exciting that even for a moment, in this period of quiet, that I can drop my gender defenses. That the label of trans makes less sense to me in this moment because there's significantly less voices interrogating my identity. And I suppose that I'll take the wins where I can get them. But I also recognize the immense privilege I have in being locked down in a living situation where I feel totally comfortable and supported. This is not a privilege I feel any remorse about, as it's something I fought very hard to secure, and it's the kind of privilege I believe everyone is entitled to. But I recognize that a lot of other people, trans and non-trans, are quarantined with people they don't feel safe or understood by, or are living alone, and those are different kinds of hell. We are social beings, and just as gender is a performance that everyone deserves to have affirmed and celebrated, being constrained to social interaction with people you do not feel safe or understood by is a great tragedy, one which we should all be working to collectively address for all people. But, as promised, I'll leave you with 3 questions for contemplation that can help you better connect today's video to your own life, wherever you are. First, what is something about yourself that you have discovered or reconnected with during this time of quarantine? It could be something related to your gender or expression, but it could also be a hobby, a habit, anything. Second, what is some part of yourself that is easier to express when you are alone or around trusted others? In other words, what is something you enjoy that is easier to enjoy privately than publicly? Third, how can you hold more space in your life for things you enjoy that are difficult for you to enjoy publicly? How can you pay better attention to which kinds of activities or expression feel best around a specific audience or no audience at all? If you're feeling brave and vulnerable enough to share any responses to today's questions, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if you enjoyed today's video or it meant something to you, please like and subscribe. Your support means a great deal to me as I want to provide reflections which speak to you. And thank you for watching. I wish you peace and perspective. I love you all as I love myself, as we are part of the same world. And I look forward to talking with you again soon.